Okay, this is part 2 of lecture 1, continuing with our discussion of the legal and informational characteristics of organizations. So basically today we're going to talk about the vision, the mission, and a little bit about the bylaws. We'll pick those up in lecture 2. Moving on, so you can review what the organizations are. They're basically defined as a group of people intentionally organized to accomplish an overall common set of goals. Moving on, the components of the organizations, again, informational, structural, procedural, or process, and the organizational environment. Moving on. Now, under the information legal, again, there are several components. There's the auspice, which we talked about in lecture 1, part 1. The vision, which is the organizational worldview, what kind of world the organization seeks to be a part of. The mission, which is the purpose of the organization, why it exists. The goals, and the bylaws, rules, and policies. So again, today we will discuss vision, mission primarily, a little bit of goals, and then we'll pick the rules and policies up in the following week. Next slide. So vision. The vision is the world that an organization seeks to create. Strictly speaking, it's useful but not legally required. It's more for internal use. It's to give participants in that organization some idea of why they're worrying about doing anything, if you will. And this is very important in human services work. So an example, here's a vision from an organization called Seven Arrows, which is a community substance abuse treatment agency. So the treatment we see is one in which all persons are free and empowered to make their own life choices, supported by caring families, neighbors, institutions, and government. All people are able to make these choices in part because they're free from the pain of addiction or unhealthy forms of dependence and are able to receive the care and treatment they need without fear of punishment, stigma, or discrimination. Pretty nice view, huh? Pretty nice world. Not there yet. But this organization, hopefully, will move us toward that. So the vision is sort of an internal document that participants join into so that they really understand what it is they're ultimately trying to get to. Next slide. Now you often hear the word mission in conjunction with the word vision. A mission statement is necessary, unlike the vision, which is not. It's a component of the legal identification of the organization and is commonly a component of organizations such as the bylaws that are used for becoming a legal identity. So here is the theme, the important piece. A mission explains how the organization will achieve its organization. In other words, what are they going to do to get us to that vision, that mental picture of what an organization aspires to be, what the world is that they're hoping. So it is extremely useful in trying to understand. So a mission is how you get there. The vision is where you're ultimately wanting to go. Next slide. So here's a few examples. And mission statements, by the way, are typically very short. This is for Nike. Many of you wear Nikes. To bring inspiration and motivation to every athlete in the world. If you have a body, you are an athlete. Pretty nice, huh? Another example. Microsoft. At Microsoft, our mission and values are to help people and businesses throughout the world realize their full potential. You've seen the commercials on TV. Yeah, we don't create the world. We help you create the world, or something like that. Next slide. Toastmasters. The mission of a Toastmasters Club is to provide a mutually supportive and positive learning environment which every individual has the opportunity to develop oral communication and leadership skills, which in turn foster self-confidence and personal growth. Next slide. And how about Widener? The mission of Widener University's Center for Social Work Education is to prepare social workers who are dedicated to the attainment of social and economic justice for all members of society. Our BSW and MSW graduates demonstrate care and compassion for their clients, an unwavering belief in client empowerment, and an abiding commitment to the values of the social work profession. The social work faculty strives to foster a supportive and nurturing environment that integrates dynamic classroom instruction and real-world learning. Our faculty's social work practice, research, and community services inform their teaching and inspire our students. Faculty members serve as role models committed to strengthening family communities and human service networks and developing knowledge for the profession. Pretty cool, huh? That's what you're a part of. Next slide. So the mission statement should be created at the very beginning of the organization, but you can modify it and change it as the organization develops. Widener's social work has gone through 3 or 4 different missions, as an example. Next slide. The characteristics of a mission statement. What is it? It's a foundation. It explains the purpose of your organization and how it daily serves its clients. So when you write a mission statement, you're saying, this is how we are going to do what we're going to do because we want the world to be a better place. Next slide. It describes the primary product or service, the distinctive competitive advantage, overall strategy for long-term success, and reflects expected level of excellence. Next slide. It is not how narrow, it is not detailed, it does not have specifics, it is a general statement. Next slide. It may determine the competitive environment, how resources will be allocated, how many team members are needed. Next slide. So to create your own mission statement often involves meeting with many members of the organization, where you identify the values, beliefs, and goals that govern your organization. Next slide. And it involves a process of prioritization. Consider writing a draft of your own mission. At the very least, you want to be able to identify the mission statement for the organizations that you work with. That's going to be an essential part of this process of determining the programming capacity and your grant ultimately. But we'll talk about that again in the next series of lectures that come. So a couple of steps here in the way after each draft. Does the mission clearly depict what the organization values and believes? Does the organization portray the values of the organization? Does it cause those involved to want to positively act? So you want to make it meaningful to folks. Next slide. And you want to communicate it, put it in writing, talk about the mission, explain the benefits, so you can get everybody on board with it. Next slide. Now, goals. These are components of the mission, how your organization carries out its mission. They're general. They focus on the major elements, not the minutiae of what your organization is doing. Next slide. Examples of goals from the MSW program. To prepare clinical social workers who can effectively deliver evidence-based social work practices to services, families, and groups, to create a learning environment that is nurturing, supportive, to have faculty and students who are actively involved in civic activities, to have faculty and students who participate in the development and dissemination of knowledge. So in summary, the vision, mission, and goals of Seven Arrows, this community service agency, there's the vision, which we read already. The mission, it's the mission of Seven Arrows to provide effective, compassionate, ethically sound, and stigma-free substance abuse treatment to all persons who suffer the pain of addiction and unhealthy forms of dependence. We seek to provide for our services in all persons in need, without regard to age, gender, race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, or past experience. We will also seek a variety of funding sources so that no person will be turned away from treatment due to inability to pay. So following this, what are the goals? Seven Arrows will provide a variety of effective evidence-based substance abuse treatment services, both inpatient and outpatient, to all persons in the North Hills region. Seven Arrows will achieve the highest standards of quality through supportive staff, non-discriminatory practices, and community involvement. Now, to summarize as well, it's important to note that these pieces, particularly the mission and goals, are part of your legal definition. So if you're starting an organization, you need to have these things written down because they go into one of the major pieces or documents that is used to govern what your organization does, and that's shown on the next slide. That's the bylaws. Bylaws are the overarching rules guiding an organization. They deal with the ultimate control of issues like ownership, the auspice again, and the policy-making authority. So in other words, who owns it? Who controls the organization? If it's a nonprofit, obviously you don't have ownership, but you serve in trusteeship to somebody. Who is it you're serving this in trust for? The community, right? And who has ultimate policy-making authority? Usually, in our world, that would be a board of trustees or a board of directors. We'll be talking more about that in a subsequent class. Next slide. So the Constitution and bylaws lay out the fundamental principles which govern an organization, and the bylaws establish the specific rules of guidance by which the group functions. All but the most informal group should have their basic structure and methods clear and in writing. Next slide. Now, the last thing we're going to just introduce here, but we're going to talk about next time, is the strategic plan. It addresses the major elements of your immediate future, and we will pick this up next time. So to summarize, now in Lecture 1, Part 1 and Part 2, we talked about some of the major components of the legal definitions of an organization. The auspice, so where does the ultimate legal control lie? Is it governmental? Is it nonprofit? Is it for-profit? We talked about the differences between nonprofit and for-profit organizations. And then we talked about some of the legal components that are common to all organizations. The vision, which is not necessarily required for its legal documents, but the mission, goals, and bylaws are. So, your assignment for this week, in addition to the readings, is to examine the video that I talked about, College Inc., and I will put that assignment along with your links to these, and you will be uploading that to these shared files for class under, I'll show you where to put that as we go. So that's our introduction to the class. I hope you have a good week, and Lecture 2 will be available within 2 weeks. Please feel free to ask questions, comment, come to class, see me sometime. Have a good day. Goodbye.